Yet day after day, something holds you back, makes you play small, keeps you thinking instead of doing. It's not the world out there. It's the older version of yourself, the one silently pulling you down every time you try to rise. And if you don't see it soon, you'll slowly become someone you no longer respect. We often believe our greatest battle is against circumstances, other people, or external challenges. But in truth, the most important battle is always fought in silence between you and the self. You continue to feed each day. Stoicism doesn't teach us to be cold or passive. It teaches us to align our inner world, to face reality directly, and to build a trustworthy character from within. You can't control the world, but you can control how you face it with discipline, with reason, and with action. And if you're ready to begin again from the inside out, then these 10 principles might just be the path you need. 1. You are what you repeat in your mind. There's a strange truth most people miss. Your mind isn't a judge. It doesn't evaluate what's right or wrong, helpful or harmful. It doesn't raise objections when you criticize yourself, nor applaud when you think positively. The mind is more like a patient recorder. It quietly stores everything you say to it. The more you repeat something, the deeper it's engraved. You could walk through a day with confident posture, but if inside you keep repeating thoughts like, "I'm not good enough," "I'll fail again just like before," or "I'm not like successful people," then you're programming yourself to react with fear, self-doubt, and withdrawal in the face of every opportunity. And the scariest part is, this process happens in silence, no alarms, no signals, no one notices, not even you. Imagine an invisible companion walking with you day and night. Everything you say, whether aloud or in whispers inside your head, it records. No feedback, no questions, no advice. And after a while, that companion starts making decisions for you, reacting for you, choosing for you based entirely on what you've told yourself. That companion is your subconscious, and it's the silent script writer of your life. The mind doesn't know the difference between a thought spoken in exhaustion and one spoken in truth. It doesn't care whether you believe it. It only cares how often you say it. A phrase you mindlessly repeat 10 times holds more power than a single positive affirmation you say once. Repetition even of falsehoods can form the foundations of belief if left unchallenged. That's why some people constantly feel like they can't, even when they're fully capable. Deep within them is corrupted data, distorted memories, childhood insecurities, unconscious comparisons from social media, all repeated and unfiltered. The mind stores these like laws, and when it comes time to act, it references that archive to decide. Think "I'm not good enough" once, and your mind treats it as a signal. Say it 10 times, and your mind treats it as truth. Say it 100 times, and it becomes reflex. And from that point on, even when opportunity knocks, you won't open the door. Not because anything is blocking you, but because your mind has been trained to fear stepping forward. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Our life is what our thoughts make it." But notice, he didn't say what we believe, but what we think about most. You don't need to believe a negative thought for it to affect you. You just need to think it often enough, and it becomes your default setting. We're not controlled by reality, we're controlled by how we perceive reality. And that perception stems from an underlying mental framework built from the thoughts we've silently repeated over and over. You may not remember how often you've thought, "I'm useless," but your mind remembers. And it's acting on that command every day without your awareness. This leads to a deeper truth. You cannot act beyond the self-image you constantly repeat in your head. You can set big goals, create detailed plans, binge motivational videos. But if inside your mind you're still living with old thoughts, you'll sabotage your plan before it even begins. Because the mind will always pull you back to the balance point it's been programmed to maintain. This doesn't mean you're stuck forever, but it does mean if you don't intentionally choose what gets repeated, then by default, the old thoughts will dominate. And you'll relive the same life, just in a different form. True freedom doesn't begin on the outside. It begins when you become aware of what's being repeated in your mind each day and choose to change it. No one can do this for you. There is no tool more powerful than becoming the programmer of your own thinking. And the first step isn't to ban negative thoughts, but to stop letting them repeat unchecked. The mind doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be conscious. Because if you begin to repeat a new phrase, a new declaration, a new image of yourself, even once a day, then gradually, the new will replace the old. Not through force, but through natural substitution, like light pushing away darkness without needing to shout. That's why, in Stoic philosophy, self-awareness and inner observation are not optional practices, they are foundational. Not so you can control emotions, but so you can direct what's quietly being planted within. Because sooner or later, you will become the garden of those seeds, whether you notice or not. Most people wait for something external to trigger internal change. They believe that once inspiration hits, or the emotion arrives, or the conditions are perfect, they'll step into their better self. But the truth is, emotions are like weather, beautiful one moment, gone the next. They come unannounced and leave just as quietly. And you can't build an identity on unstable weather patterns. Those who live by emotion act in bursts of excitement and quit when things feel mundane. They'll write a 10-page plan after a moving speech, then ignore every step because the next morning they don't feel like it. And then they blame their lack of willpower when the real problem wasn't willpower, but the lack of an internal system. No clear command was issued or repeated to replace the old patterns. If you want real change, you can't rely on emotion. You must rely on a new command, a carefully chosen phrase that captures the self you want to become, repeated consistently until it becomes the dominant voice within you. It doesn't need to be fancy. It doesn't need to be poetic. One sentence is enough to guide your entire mindset and behavior, something like, I finish what I start, or I take action even when I'm uncertain. These phrases are not meant to deceive. They're instructions, a call, a compass for your inner system reset. You might wonder, but what if I don't believe that sentence yet? You don't need to believe it to begin. You just need to repeat it intentionally. The mind doesn't need 100% belief. It only needs consistency. Because consistency creates gravity, and gravity always shapes behavior. When you repeat something long enough, behavior begins to orbit around it naturally without resistance. This is something the Stoics understood deeply. Epictetus didn't teach you to feel strong. He taught you to act like someone who is strong. Speak like someone who is strong, and you will become it. Because what you consciously repeat becomes habit, and habit, when sustained, reshapes you. I once saw a man change his entire life with a single phrase he wrote himself. I am someone my child can be proud of. He stuck it to his mirror, saved it on his phone, repeated it every morning as he left the house. The shift didn't happen overnight, but within weeks, every choice he made, from food to work to how he treated others, began to orbit that phrase. It was no longer something he read. It became a center of gravity, a North Star. And the opposite is also true. If you keep repeating things like, I suck at this, I always procrastinate, or I'm not good enough, then without meaning to, you are commanding your mind to live within those limits. You are silently rewriting the map of your life with poisoned words. That's why you must rewrite it. The new phrase doesn't need to spark fireworks. It just needs to be clear, honest, consistent. If each morning before the world pulls you away, you take 1 minute to sit and say your chosen phrase out loud, you begin reinstalling your internal operating system. And if you do it again at noon when fatigue sets in, you'll avoid the old reactive loops. Repeat it again at night and you teach your subconscious to sleep with the new self, not the old voices whispering in your head. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." He didn't say the thoughts we enjoy, but the ones we think often, which means you don't need to wait for the perfect feeling to repeat the right thing. You just need to repeat the right thing and the feelings will follow. This is the difference between reactive living and intentional living. The reactive are pulled by emotions that come and go. The intentional guide their minds with chosen words, repeated even when the feelings don't align. That is freedom, not feeling amazing, but moving in the right direction even when you feel nothing at all. If you don't rewrite your inner script on purpose, the old noise, even if false, will keep echoing without resistance. And you'll live the same life, with the same fears and delays, just wearing a different outer shell. But if you're conscious enough to sit down, pick a phrase, and start repeating it today, you've already created a small turning point. And small turning points, when sustained, lead to an entirely new trajectory. You don't need to change your whole self overnight. You only need to change the habit of what you repeat inside. Because you don't become what you want. You become what you repeat. And that's where all rebirth begins. 2. Faith is the antidote to fear. Fear is a teacher, but most of us have never learned to listen to it as one. We only know how to avoid it, soothe it, or worse, let it dictate every important decision in our lives. We call it an obstacle, a barrier to break through, a sign that this isn't the right time. But if you pause for just a moment and look closely, you'll see fear doesn't come to stop you, it comes to expose you. Fear is not the enemy. It's the most honest mirror your mind has. In the moments you tremble, delay, or hesitate, you're brushing against the edge of your old self. That place isn't where you fail. It's where you have the chance to redefine who you are. But the condition is, you must dare to face it. When you fear failure, what you truly fear is not doing something wrong. It's the feeling of being judged, being looked down on, being dismissed. When you fear starting something new, the fear doesn't come from the act itself, but from the image you imagine of yourself if that act isn't perfect. And that's where the light needs to shine. What are you trying to protect? An old expectation, a pretty image in someone else's eyes, a belief carried since childhood that I'm not good enough. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If something causes you fear, look it in the eye and ask, what exactly is so frightening here?" That question isn't meant to fool yourself. It's meant to dissolve illusion. Fear often hides behind a fog of assumptions, but when you drag it into the light and break it down into clear questions, you realize fear was never real. Only you and the meaning you assigned to the situation. I once watched a talented woman turn down the chance to speak in front of 500 people because she was afraid she'd stutter. But when I asked deeper, what she was really afraid of wasn't her voice. It was a memory from 5th grade when classmates mocked her for forgetting her lines during a school play. She wasn't trembling because of the audience. She trembled because a younger version of herself hadn't yet been healed. And when she realized that, tears fell not out of weakness, but because she finally understood. Fear isn't a shadow from the present. It's a fragment of the past that hasn't been embraced. That's why you must not hate fear. It doesn't come to punish you. It comes to remind you to go back and finish the conversation you left unfinished with yourself. Each time you step back, it's not because the challenge is too great, but because a part of you still doesn't believe you deserve to overcome it. And you can't fix that by trying to toughen up. You have to understand it more deeply. Understand that fear is always a map, not a wall. Understand that if it shows up intensely, you're likely close to true growth. Understand that beneath every fear lies a call. Look here. Listen to me. Be a little braver so you don't live your life in hiding. And you won't be alone. The great Stoic philosophers knew that fear is inseparable from the journey of right living. Epictetus once said, "No one progresses without first being shaken." That shaking, sometimes named anxiety, doubt, hesitation, is not proof of weakness. It's evidence that you're stepping out of your comfort zone. So, next time you feel fear, don't ask, "How do I overcome this?" Ask, "What is this fear revealing about me?" And then use that truth as your starting point, not to avoid it, but to understand it. Because you can't rise above yourself unless you dare to turn inward and see clearly who you are, what you're still clinging to, and what you can let go of to become larger than your fear. When things are uncertain, most people choose to wait. They wait until they're ready enough. Wait until all the signs align. Wait until there's no doubt or risk left. But the brutal truth is, that perfect moment will never come. Life doesn't hand you a map in advance. It gives you a blurry path and asks you to walk first, then let the map unfold. And at that point of uncertainty, you must choose to wait in fear or to move forward in faith. Faith is not a feeling, it's an action, a decisive choice that I will keep going even without guarantees. I will act according to reason, values, and what I know is right, not the loud panic of insecurity in my mind. Because if you only act when you're certain, you're not truly living, you're just reacting conditionally. Epictetus once wrote, "Choose what is right, let the rest follow as it may." What he meant is, you don't need control over the outcome to act rightly. You only need control over yourself. In a world that shifts every second, inner commitment is the only shelter of real stability. And faith in its deepest sense is not a trust in proof, but in the identity you choose to live by. I once met a father who lost his job, but still woke at 5 a.m. every morning to bake bread at home, not because he was sure he'd succeed, but because he knew his child needed to see a man who doesn't give up. He didn't wait for funding, a network, or customers. He started with a bag of flour and a promise. I'll do everything I can. That wasn't blind optimism, that was faith. And when I met him again 2 years later, his small bakery had become a neighborhood staple, not because the bread was the best, but because the place carried a real energy, the energy of unconditional persistence. Faith isn't believing everything will be okay. It's believing I will be okay, even if everything doesn't go as I want. And that belief keeps you standing when plans collapse, when others doubt you, when you doubt yourself. Because you no longer make decisions based on what might happen, you make decisions based on who you've chosen to become. And that makes you unshakable, not because you don't feel fear, but because fear is no longer the ruler of your actions. Marcus Aurelius lived through plagues, wars, betrayal, the deaths of loved ones. He wasn't promised any result. Yet he wrote every night, reflected every morning, and acted every day, not because he believed things would go his way, but because he believed he could live rightly no matter the circumstances. And that kind of faith that is true freedom. Because when you only believe in what's already certain, you build your life on sand. But when you choose to believe in principles, in virtue, in the character you've forged, then even in the storm, you remain yourself. And that is something no one can ever take from you. If today you feel lost, stepping into something unclear, remember, you don't need all the answers. You only need one question. Am I committed to living rightly even when I don't know what comes next? If your answer is yes, then you don't need another sign. You are the sign. And every step you choose with reason, even the smallest, builds a life no fear can break. 3. The one goal, the axis of your life. The world today isn't lacking noise. What you lack is an anchor, something to keep you from being swept away. When you haven't clearly defined what matters most, everything else will compete for that spot. And they win by appearing urgent, exciting, even essential, but deep down, they're hollow. Things you don't truly need disguise themselves as opportunities, connections, or things worth trying, and you'll say yes to all of them simply because you never stopped to ask what is truly worth it. People don't get lost for lack of options. They get lost for lack of standards by which to choose. They hop from job to job, change goals constantly, say yes to things they don't believe in, do work they don't love, not because they lack willpower, but because they haven't found a center to hold on to when the storm hits. And the sad truth is, without internal standards, you'll live by whatever is shouted the loudest. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you don't choose how to live, you'll be forced to live how others want." When you haven't identified your core, you can't say no to anything. And if you can't say no, your life no longer belongs to you. It becomes a mirror of others' desires, a patchwork of external expectations, a replica built from unconscious comparisons. You think you're living intentionally, but you're really just reacting to stimuli. A phone notification pulls you from your task. A comment makes you doubt yourself. A new trend diverts your direction. And little by little, you drift further from the center. Why are you here? A core goal isn't just something you want to have. It's what you choose as the standard for every action, reaction, decision, even silence. It's what you'll hold on to when everything else changes. It's what you'll return to when you're doubted, hurt, or tempted. Not to insist that you're right, but to keep from falling apart when the world spins around you. Without a core goal, you become fragmented, living many roles, wearing many masks, speaking contradictory truths, and eventually losing your inner voice. You won't know what to choose when standing at a crossroads, won't know what's enough, won't know what you're striving for. And that emptiness, that space where no goal lives, will be filled by anxiety, confusion, and meaninglessness. I once met a successful man, wealthy, with kids in good schools, but his eyes betrayed exhaustion. When I asked what was wearing him down, he didn't answer right away. After a pause, he said, "I worked so hard to get everything I thought I should have, but now I realize I never chose anything for myself. I was just living by what society said was right." That realization, though late, was the beginning of a new path, to live by what's essential, not what's celebrated. In a world full of choices, the ability to filter is more important than the ability to multitask. And you can only filter when you have a standard to compare against. Does this help me live in alignment with what I've committed to? Without that standard, everything will seem appealing, everything will seem possible, and you'll exhaust yourself in your own maze. The Stoics didn't chase outcomes. They didn't blindly pursue success as a status. They pursued a principle of life, something they could control, no matter the circumstance. It could be integrity, courage, calm, or resilience. But whatever it was, they chose one and let everything else orbit around it. Once you identify your core, you don't need to control every variable. You only need to control your choice in each moment. A person who chooses to live with responsibility will act differently, speak differently, rise differently, even when misunderstood, disadvantaged, or alone. And you'll be surprised. When you live aligned with your core, you won't need to explain yourself. People will feel the difference. A real goal isn't something you achieve and move on. It's something you return to whenever something inside you begins to shake. It's not a finish line, it's a foundation. Not a destination, but a direction. Like a compass that doesn't take you anywhere specific, but ensures you never drift too far from your path. And in a world of constant change, sometimes direction matters more than speed. We often mistake goal as future things, big, dramatic, measurable, or provable. But those goals easily become pressure because they only survive in expectation. The moment you fail or even just don't see results, you lose all motivation. And then you switch to a new goal. The cycle continues. Not because you're impatient, but because you never chose an axis that could steady you in the present. Marcus Aurelius didn't talk about success. He talked about virtue. He didn't ask, "What will I gain?" but, "Am I living in accordance with human reason?" For a Stoic, the goal isn't to draw up a grand vision, but to define a core value that adjusts even the smallest behaviors. When someone insults you, you return to the axis. Do I choose calm or react? When you face failure, you return to the axis. Do I take responsibility or shift blame? When you're working and tempted by something easier, you return to the axis. Do I choose focus or short-term comfort? A true axis will make you live consciously. It clarifies every choice not by ease or difficulty, but by alignment. And that consistency is what forms dignity. A person who doesn't live by consistent values will always doubt themselves. But a person who returns to their principle, though they fail or fall, will have peace in their eyes, because they know they didn't drift. I once spoke with an Olympic athlete. When I asked, "How do you maintain such brutal discipline for decades without quitting?" he replied gently, "Because I don't see it as effort, I see it as part of who I am. I don't ask if I should train today, I just do it. It's the life I chose." That's what makes the difference. The average person chooses goals to aim for. The strong choose values to live with every day. The axis isn't a title you claim at the finish line. It's the question you carry every morning. It's what holds you steady in silence when no one's watching, no one applauding. It answers your hardest questions not with logic, but with loyalty to yourself. You can be poor, you can be wrong, you can lose everything. But if you can still return to what's essential within you, you are still yourself. When you don't live with a clear axis, you'll always feel lacking. You'll search for a sense of enough in your work, in love, in others' approval, but true enoughness only comes when you feel you're living rightly. Enough isn't when you have everything. It's when there's nothing left to run from. And that wholeness, it doesn't come from glorious moments. It comes from the quiet decisions you make rightly, even when no one sees. You don't have to be perfect, but you must be honest with what you've committed to. That is the essence of an axis. It doesn't promise glory, but it saves you from inner collapse. It's where you return when everything else breaks. It's what keeps your spine straight, your self-respect intact, your eyes awake even in a storm of doubt, noise, and betrayal. Not everyone needs to know what your axis is, but you must. Because that's how you tell the difference between acting from identity and reacting from impulse. Between the one who lives deliberately and the one who's constantly pulled along. And if you don't yet have a clear axis, then every day is a beginning to choose one. It doesn't have to be complicated. Choose one thing, one value you're willing to live with, one standard you'll willingly return to, and live it long enough that the world knows who you are without you saying a word. 4. Mastery is the true weapon. There are two kinds of confidence in this life. One comes from how others see you when they praise you, approve of you, applaud you, or label you as talented. That kind of confidence is light, floaty, and fades quickly because it depends on external feedback. But there's another kind, heavier, deeper, quieter, that comes from knowing, I can do this, even if no one sees, even if no one acknowledges it, even if I never say it out loud. I know it's real. That's the kind of confidence that can endure the pressure of life. Many people think confidence comes from believing I'm good, I'm valuable, I'll succeed. But no, that's desire, affirmation, expectation. True, lasting confidence isn't a declaration, it's a quiet feeling forged through hundreds, thousands of hours of practice. When you no longer measure your worth by compliments, when you no longer need a stage to prove who you are, when you walk into a room and don't have to say much because your skill speaks for itself. That's when you've reached real confidence, the kind that doesn't come from the outside, but radiates from within. Those with deep mastery don't need to act tough. They don't need to argue. They don't need to assert. They let their work do the talking. They're the kind of person you can hand something to and walk away because you know they'll see it through. They're the kind of person who, by simply standing still, you can feel they command the space. Not because they raise their voice, but because they carry weight. And that weight doesn't come from reputation, but from finely honed skill, earned in silence. Epictetus said, "Don't try to seem wise, just be wise." It sounds simple, but it's one of the most important principles for a steady soul. Don't perform, become. This world is full of noise, polished profiles, inflated resumes. But true masters don't need to inflate because they have substance. They aren't afraid of being underestimated. Don't panic when someone else shines brighter, and don't rush into competition just to prove worth because they know real value isn't loud. It runs deep. You can't build that kind of confidence in a day or through a self-help course. You have to commit to the long road where you choose a skill, a field, a craft, and refine it until you no longer doubt your ability. Not because you think you're better than others, but because you've witnessed your own growth year after year, month after month, day after day. You are the witness to your own effort, and so you don't need to appear. True confidence isn't saying, "I'm not afraid." It's having walked through fear, stumbled, repeated, learned, and come back to your work. It's knowing you can do something well with care, with efficiency, without flash. It's seeing someone better than you, and instead of envy, turning inward, deepening your skill without panic. Because you know, the only thing you control is your progress. Mastery is the foundation of confidence. Without it, every word of encouragement is just a patch. You'll feel insecure every time you meet someone better. You'll always live in need of validation, but when you're truly good at something, whether it's fixing engines, writing code, teaching, making music, cooking, or strategic thinking, you'll feel a calm stability within. Not because you're cool, but because you're useful. And the useful don't need attention, they know they're needed. Don't build your confidence on sand, on compliments, titles, likes, or fleeting recognition. Build it on rock, on skills you refine daily. Let it come from knowing what you can do, what you're good at, and what you're still improving without anyone watching. That's confidence that doesn't shatter because it doesn't live on the surface. And when you have that, there's no need to say much. No need to convince anyone you're worthy. No need to race the crowd, because you know you can stand alone and still bring value. No one can take that from you, and no one needs to recognize it for it to be real. It's already a part of you, like a sword you carry always, but never need to draw just to intimidate. No one will walk this road of mastery with you forever. There will be moments you feel left behind, invisible, or forgotten in a world obsessed with standing out. But it's in those very moments when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, that you'll understand something. What you're building isn't a flashy career, but a foundation no one can touch except you. Mastery is a quiet path. It doesn't shine like the spotlight on a stage. It isn't celebrated like trendy things. It's the boring repetition, done again and again. It's attention to detail, small things no one notices, and no one cares if you skip. No one asks you to be excellent. No one pushes you forward when you want to quit. It's just you and the daily choice. Continue or give up. That's why mastery is never built in noise. It only grows in silence, where you don't need to share, don't need to prove, don't need to show off. You know that if you skip a detail today, you'll feel it tomorrow. And if you get it right today, even unnoticed, you'll benefit from it months, years down the road. No need to explain. The results will speak right on time. In an era where everyone wants to be known fast and wide, choosing depth over reach is a hard decision. It means turning away from the spotlight to go inward. Turning away from the audience to face yourself, turning away from speed to find direction, and the price you'll pay is solitude. You'll feel like you're going against the flow, but it's because of that you'll find what the crowd never will: real mastery. You can't achieve mastery if you're counting likes, views, or reactions. Because mastery doesn't run on reactions, it runs on precision. You must practice a skill so often there's no doubt left. You must understand the principles so deeply, nothing shakes you, and you must be brave enough to continue even when no one supports you. That's not stubbornness, it's a deep commitment to the value you're building. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Love the work you've been given, put your mind to it, and if you can't love it, then do it as someone who honors discipline." That sentence is a compass for anyone choosing the path of mastery. You won't always feel inspired. You won't always be passionate. But if you're steady, working with care, with responsibility, with respect for the work itself, then, over time, you'll pass through emotion, pass through doubt, and reach a rare kind of freedom. The freedom of owning your skill. Mastery is freedom. Because when you're skilled to the point of fluency, you're no longer passive. You're not dependent on luck. You don't fear losing opportunities because you can create them. You don't fear being left behind because you can carve your own path. And you don't fear losing recognition because what you have isn't surface, it's real substance. The crowd can't give you that. A weekend course can't give you that. Only patient repetition can give you a power no one can take away. That's why those who are truly skilled are often quiet. They don't need loud competition. They don't need to win arguments. They don't need to say they're good because they can do it, and do it well, under any condition, anywhere. They're not the first ones the spotlight finds, but when things get serious, when real problems arise, when the crowd isn't equipped to respond, it's them everyone turns to. You can choose a crowded path, full of applause but lacking depth. Or you can choose a solitary one where you walk alone, but each step lays down a solid brick of skill. And one day you'll realize you no longer need the crowd. Not because you've shut down, but because you're full within. You don't need noise because your calm has its own resonance. And you don't need to do anything flashy because real mastery never needs to show off. 5. Environment determines the endurance of willpower. We often admire those with extraordinary willpower, as if they possess some special ability the rest of the world lacks. But if you pause long enough and observe more closely, you'll see that most inner strength doesn't come from innate talent, but from an environment they've deliberately crafted. Willpower isn't a blinding flash that bursts forth in a supernatural moment. It's the result of hundreds of small, repeated factors that create an ecosystem nurturing the mental resilience you see in them. Someone who wakes up early doesn't do so because they're constantly brimming with motivation at 5 a.m., but because they've structured an environment that makes it automatic. Someone who isn't tempted by social media isn't stronger than you. They've deleted the apps, turned off notifications, and left their phone in another room while working. They understand that if the environment is allowed to pull at them, no one can resist forever. So they don't rely on force. They redesign their surroundings so willpower isn't wasted unnecessarily. The more you believe willpower is something you must summon to fight off every temptation, the faster you'll burn out. Willpower is like a muscle. It has limits, it fatigues, and it's affected by what you see, hear, and experience daily. If every time you sit down to work you're battling noise, clutter, or people constantly interrupting your flow, it's not that you lack willpower. You're living in a context that breaks it down. Epictetus once emphasized, "Pay close attention to what you're exposed to daily, because those are the things shaping who you are." That statement isn't an exaggeration, it's a wake-up call. The environment doesn't just influence behavior, it rewires how you think, how you react, and even how you evaluate yourself. A setting that constantly praises ease will make you feel guilty for choosing discipline. An environment addicted to complaining will make you feel strange for choosing silence and action. And if you stay there long enough, you'll begin to doubt your own values, not because you've changed, but because your will has been silently worn down, little by little. We don't get to choose the circumstances we're born into, but we can choose what stays in our living space and in our mind. A clean desk, quiet background music, a book instead of a phone screen, a friend who listens rather than one who judges. These things may seem small, but when combined, they form the foundation of a grounded individual. Don't wait until you feel motivated to change. Start by removing what's been draining your motivation in the first place. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't let external things disturb you. Build an inner world so strong they can't get in." But to do that, he didn't just meditate in his mind. He distanced himself from distractions, actively limited the information he consumed, and lived so simply that nothing unnecessary could knock him off balance. His willpower wasn't legendary. It was the product of disciplined environmental choices. You can learn to say no to temptations, but more effective is learning to keep them from showing up too often. You can train yourself to resist negative people, but a more sustainable approach is choosing to walk with those who live by higher standards. You can force yourself to work in chaos, but it's far easier to build a space that makes you want to focus. That's not avoidance, it's strategy. It's the wisdom of someone who knows their limits and designs their life to support the best version of themselves more often. What defines the strong-willed isn't their ability to endure, it's their ability to recognize what quietly weakens them and the courage to change it. You don't need to be superhuman. Just clear-eyed enough to observe your surroundings, brave enough to remove what no longer fits, and patient enough to rebuild a space where willpower no longer needs to be summoned. It simply arises from how you live. Humans aren't born with a complete map in their heads. Every thought, every belief is planted and repeated. And if you think you're thinking independently, you might be wrong. Most of your thoughts are the product of the environment you're in. You don't think your own way, you think the way your world has trained you to. Take a look at an ordinary day. You wake up, check your phone, see a stream of negative news. You walk into the kitchen and hear a loved one complain about something unresolved. You open your email and see your boss's criticism, then spend the day caught in conversations full of judgment and comparison. You didn't consciously choose that negativity, but you absorbed it, unguarded, unfiltered. And just like that, your mind starts copying it as a new default. The environment isn't just physical scenery. It's the sum of what you're constantly exposed to: words, sounds, images, other people's emotional states, endless shallow conversations, and even the awkward silences in relationships that haven't healed. All of it seeps into you, quietly but steadily enough to change how you see the world and yourself. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Our life is shaped by the thoughts we repeat." But those thoughts don't appear out of nowhere. They're shaped by environment. When you're around someone who complains constantly, you don't just hear their voice, you adopt the rhythm of their judgment. When you're surrounded by those waiting for opportunity rather than creating it, you begin to doubt your own agency. And when you live in a space with no high standards, your efforts will start to feel too much, weird, or overdone. It's not that you changed, it's that the environment changed you. That's why willpower can't exist in isolation from environment. You may be resilient, but if you're constantly up against waves of negativity, you'll eventually start doubting yourself, feeling tired of your path, and slipping into a place of, "I know what to do, but I can't do it anymore." Not because you're weak, but because your environment has reprogrammed you from the inside out. Have you ever wondered why, when you're in a calm place around grounded people, you become more thoughtful? Why stepping away from social media makes your mind clearer and your intuition sharper? It's not a coincidence. It's proof that your mind is being reprogrammed by a healthier rhythm. A healthy mind cannot grow on chaos. It needs consistency, respect, and patterns of thinking reinforced by its environment. Epictetus advised, "Be cautious of whom you allow into your mind, for they'll stay longer than you think." The people you see daily, the content you consume, aren't just for entertainment. They become background software influencing your behavior. They don't knock when entering. They slip in through your gaze at others, your reactions to failure, and how you speak to yourself when you mess up. And if you don't reprogram them consciously, you'll live as a version shaped by someone else. So you need the courage to ask again, what kind of environment am I living in? Is it lifting me up or quietly dragging me down? Does it reinforce my self-belief or just feed the sense that I'm never enough? And most importantly, who am I letting reprogram my mind every day? When you answer those questions, you'll understand. Deep change doesn't begin with a dramatic act. It begins by tuning the frequency you live on. It might be turning off a toxic video, unfollowing someone who drains you, stepping away from shallow conversations, or redesigning your living space to be quieter, brighter, and full of things that make you want to sit and think deeper. These things are small, but they form the foundation for reclaiming the power to reprogram yourself. Environment is never neutral. It's always shaping you whether you notice it or not. You can let your mind be molded by whatever reaches it first, or you can choose to be the one who defines what's allowed into your sphere of influence. That's when willpower stops being a struggle and starts becoming the natural result of a mental ecosystem you built for yourself. 6. Speak as if it has already become real. Nothing in this life shapes you more quietly yet persistently than the words you say to yourself every day. Not what others say, not what you read or hear online, But the simple sentences repeated in your head like a background song that never stops. And before you know it, you begin living to its rhythm without even realizing. Take a moment to examine how you speak about yourself. I'm forgetful. I'm not patient enough. This just isn't for me. These seemingly harmless statements don't just reflect temporary truths, they shape the identity you carry. Because the mind doesn't verify logic. It doesn't pause to challenge or assess whether your words are universally accurate. It simply records. It simply listens. It simply repeats. And from what you repeat, it builds patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits become destiny. Marcus Aurelius didn't write in his journal to remind the world who he was. He wrote to remind himself of who he wanted to become. Each page was a deliberate choice of words. Each line a brick laid in the foundation of thought. He didn't leave the shaping of his character to fleeting emotions. He built it with disciplined language, even when no one else was listening. You might say it's just a passing comment, that you're merely being honest about how you feel. But true honesty isn't in saying what you feel, it's in deciding whether that feeling will dictate your words and define who you are. When you say, "I'm just not a motivated person," you're not describing a moment, you're locking it in as an identity. And the frightening part is, say it enough times, and your mind stops looking for change. It surrenders, because it believes you've accepted it as unchangeable. Try shifting just one sentence. Don't say, "I'm not good at expressing myself." Say, "I'm learning to communicate more clearly." Don't say, "I can't handle pressure." Say, "I'm building my resilience." Not to sugarcoat, not to perform, but to open the door to a new possibility, a new definition of you. Because every sentence is a suggestion to your future, and the future you live into will follow whichever suggestion you repeat most. Stoics don't use speech to complain. They use it to train the mind. They don't need others to hear them to feel valid. They need to hear themselves say what's right. When Epictetus said, "Before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it aligned with virtue?" He wasn't writing a code of conduct for society. He was handing you a mental filter where everything that leaves your mouth must pass through reason and moral clarity. The world you live in, every reaction, every choice, every decision starts with a string of thoughts in your head. And if you don't control them, eventually they will control you, leading you down roads you didn't intend, into becoming someone you no longer respect, and living a life you never consciously chose. So, choose again. Begin by speaking what you truly want to believe, even if it feels awkward at first, even if no one agrees with you, even if you're not yet convinced yourself. Say things that are good, strong, and responsible as if they're already true. Because only when you speak as if it's already real, do you begin to live in a way that can make it real. We often speak as if we're filing a report, hoping others will agree, affirm, or at least respond positively. But the awakened don't speak to persuade. They speak to carve the right things deeper into their own mind. Because words are not for display, they are an act of shaping. A spoken sentence doesn't just stir the air, it rewires your interior structure, subtly but profoundly. Think back to the last time you said, "I'm fine," while chaos raged inside. Not because you were lying, but because you were trying to keep your mind from falling apart. That's not emotional denial. That's a reminder to yourself. You're still standing, still breathing, still choosing dignity in the middle of the storm. A statement like that isn't a plea for sympathy, it's a quiet vow that this storm will pass and you will remain. Words, when spoken with clear intent, can anchor the spirit. Between doubt and conviction, disappointment and discipline, temptation and direction, sometimes all it takes is one line you've prepared in advance. I do this because it's the right thing. It doesn't need anyone's approval, but repeated enough, it becomes the spine of your decisions, a kind of verbal centering. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't a philosophy for others to read. It was a self-reminder of what he still controlled. When chaos erupted around him, he didn't shout for the world to be quiet. He whispered to himself to stay grounded. That calm wasn't born of temperament. It came from disciplined speech, from choosing what words would be spoken even if no one else heard, but he heard. You don't need a loud voice to be strong, but you do need a clear declaration to yourself so you don't get swept away by murky emotions. And if each morning you say to yourself, "I don't control everything, but I will control how I respond," that sentence, over time, becomes your inner fortress. No one can build it for you, but you can build it sentence by sentence, word by word, choice by choice. Speaking what you live doesn't mean you've already arrived, but it's how you begin heading in the right direction. Not speaking to pretend, but speaking to orient. You say, "I will remain kind," not because you always are, but because you don't want anger to become default. You say, "I choose calm," not because you've never raged, but because you refuse to be defined by it. Each intentional word is a step away from surrender. And if you don't speak the life you want to live, you'll unconsciously live a life you never chose. Casual phrases like, "Everyone's like this," "I can't help it," or "I'm probably not good enough," aren't just sighs. They're quiet manifestos of resignation. And sadly, they're repeated far more often than sentences of strength, responsibility, or direction. Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." But to embody it, you must first shape it with language. Not by saying much, but by saying what's right. Speaking not to impress, but to train. And every time you say something that aligns with virtue, even if you're not living it fully yet, you're sharpening a spiritual sword. One you'll need in trials, temptations, and the solitude of becoming your true self. So don't wait for others to believe in you before you dare say what's right. Speak what's right so you can start believing in your own action. Speak as if you're retraining your mind to live a life with direction. Because in the end, the most important listener is always you. 7. Move like fire. Some people walk into a room carrying a kind of energy that words can't explain, not because they speak loudly, not because they try to impress, not because they're the center of the story. There's simply something about them that commands attention. Like fire, even small, it still shines, still gives warmth or caution, depending on how you stand near it. Fire doesn't ask permission to exist. It doesn't need validation or approval. It just is true to its nature and lets others decide how they'll respond. Humans, on the other hand, often give away their power the moment they think their existence needs someone else's permission. We wait to be seen, understood, supported, invited. But as Epictetus once said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Fire doesn't speak when ignored. It simply continues to burn. And when someone gets close, they feel the undeniable heat. Fire doesn't try to make peace with conditions. It doesn't compromise with circumstance. Rain, wind, wet ground, fire may struggle, but if there's fuel, if there's heat, if there's will, it will rise. So do people. You don't need to become someone else to be accepted. You need to become fully yourself, clearly, unapologetically, even if others are uncomfortable with that truth. What makes you strong isn't being welcomed. It's not losing yourself when no one welcomes you. The more you live in alignment with your values, uncompromising, unapologetic, unperformed, the more you resemble fire. And fire never asks, "Am I allowed to shine?" It simply does, because that's its nature. Every time you doubt yourself, every time you wait for consensus before moving forward, you place a shield over your inner fire. You shrink it not because it's weak, but because you fear that its light might disturb others. And the irony is, only when you stop asking for permission to exist do you begin to truly live. No longer needing affirmation, no longer waiting for the world to turn green for your path. You become your own signal, and that, though quiet, is powerful. Those who've walked through darkness, who've been overlooked, who've chosen not to react but to keep going, they are living proof of this. They don't apologize for showing up. They don't dim themselves just because others aren't used to the light. They live like fire, natural, powerful, non-negotiable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." You don't need to clap back. You don't need to prove anything. Your presence, when clear, is the fullest reply. Like fire, it doesn't argue with water, doesn't explain itself to wind with air and fuel. It just continues to burn. You might be misunderstood. Some may call you arrogant, cold, hard to approach, but that's the price of clarity. And most people aren't willing to pay it. They choose to be easy, nice, agreeable, in exchange for a sense of belonging. But fire belongs nowhere. It is itself and makes the world adjust. You can choose to burn like fire or drift like smoke. One is identity. One is confusion. One is direction. One is dispersion. Every day you're choosing either to shine your own way or to fade quietly just to keep others comfortable. But remember, light doesn't ask darkness for permission. It only needs to be lit, and everything else adjusts. Fire isn't in a hurry. It doesn't shove, doesn't rush forward chaotically, but if you observe it long enough, you'll see. It never stops. It moves constantly, silently, persistently. Whether small in a candle or vast in a forest, fire keeps its own rhythm, unhurried but unstoppable. That is its survival instinct, and that too should be how a mature person moves in a world obsessed with speed but blind to depth. We live in a time where everything must be fast. Fast success, fast fame, fast money, fast results. But as Marcus Aurelius warned, no great thing is created suddenly. What lasts doesn't come from haste. Fire doesn't burn everything in a second, only to burn out right after. Wise fire sustains. It doesn't need instant brilliance, but it will dominate in time. And so should people not win immediately, just never stop. There are people who always seem to fall behind in the eyes of others. They're quiet, they don't flaunt, they don't demand attention. But day after day they move forward. They build a skill, keep a habit, lay a foundation. At first, no one notices, but time answers. They're the only ones still standing when all the fast ones fall. Like fire, they stay on their course, not flashy, just burning steadily. True strength isn't in speed, it's in consistency. And consistency doesn't need to be big, it just needs to be unbroken. One page of reading, one short writing session, one workout, one moment of stillness to reflect. These small things, done daily, will become a great flame. But if you keep stopping and restarting, you'll always remain flickers, never warm enough, never bright enough. The Stoics understood this. What matters is not how much you do today, but whether you have enough reason and resolve to keep doing the right thing tomorrow and the next day and the days after that. They didn't chase dazzling outcomes. They chased endurance of the mind. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." We're not short on time, we're short on fire-keeping. Reflect on your day. How many times have you wanted to quit just because you didn't see results? How many times have you changed direction just because others were moving faster? How many times have you dropped a good habit because it didn't yet feel victorious? And after all that, have you ever wondered, if I had just continued even slowly but steadily, how far would I have come by now? Fire doesn't race. It doesn't compare itself to any other flame. It just knows. If there's still fuel and still will, it will survive. And keep surviving. That's what you should remind yourself each morning. I don't have to do everything today. I just have to do one thing and do it well. And tomorrow, I'll do it again. You don't need to tell anyone. Don't need to announce it. Just do it. Every right action, no matter how small, is you adding oil to your internal flame. You don't need to blaze right now, but you must make sure it never goes out. A flame doesn't need to hurry, but it never stops. And one who understands this won't be rattled by others' pace, won't be distracted by short-term results, won't be pulled into races they didn't choose. They follow their own rhythm, steady, deep, powerful, like fire. And eventually, everything around them will have to notice. That person never stopped, they just never needed noise to be known. 8. Train the mind. Master the inner whisper. No one teaches us how to think. From an early age, we're taught how to read, speak, behave, but rarely how to examine the thoughts inside our own heads. And so, for decades of life, we carry with us a powerful engine, yet never learn how to woo it. The most dangerous thing isn't what others say to you, but what you silently keep repeating to yourself, day after day. The mind is like a stream. It flows to the lowest point unless someone directs it. If you don't teach it how to think, it will be programmed by whatever you hear most: criticism, fear, unresolved expectations, emotional outbursts, and wounds that never healed. It records everything without asking for truth, without needing evidence. It just repeats and repeats, until one day you believe you're weak, unworthy, or a failure. But in truth, you've just been listening to a collection of unexamined old thoughts. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A man's life is what his thoughts make of it." But most of us don't create thoughts, we repeat them unconsciously. We don't live by reason, we live by reflex. Each morning you open your eyes and feel something: boredom, anxiety, anger, or confusion, and you believe it's real. But pause and ask, why am I thinking this? Who planted this in my head? Is it even true? Or just a long-standing mental habit rooted in the past? Thought is not the enemy. But left unchecked, it becomes the silent culprit behind unproductive days, broken relationships, and inner collapses no one else sees. It recalls failures, exaggerates flaws, and distorts even the good. You may be in a safe place, doing the right thing, yet your mind warns you of some vague threat, simply because it's used to living in anxiety. Like a wild horse, your mind is powerful, stubborn, and incredibly smart. But if you don't train it, it'll take you off track, trample what matters, and flee at the slightest noise. On the other hand, If you spend time observing it, listening to it, guiding it, it becomes your most loyal companion, helping you see clearly at every turn, steady even in strong headwinds. Epictetus emphasized, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. But you'll never become who you want to be if the dominant voice in your head belongs to someone else to fear, to past failures, to a history you've outgrown but still follow. The first step isn't to think positively, it's to identify what voice is speaking in your mind and to ask where it came from. Not to control the mind, but to understand that you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of thought, and from there, you can choose what stays. Training the mind doesn't happen in a day. It's a lifelong process, repetitive, just like lifting weights, running, or playing music. You sort your thoughts the way a farmer selects seeds. Not every seed gets planted. Not every idea deserves nurturing. You learn to distinguish. This is truth that is a passing emotion. This is insight that is an echo from the past. And in doing so, you begin reshaping yourself from the inside out. You can't stop thoughts, but you can learn to guide them. And once you do, you're no longer a victim of your mind, you become its guide. A conscious person knows what they're thinking and why. Someone who lives with depth, not because they're always right, but because they don't let their mind wander in chaos forever. That's where the journey of self-mastery begins. Not with action, not with fleeting determination, but in a quiet moment, when you turn inward and ask, does this thought truly serve the person I'm trying to become? You can shut your eyes, cover your ears, or stay silent with the outside world, but you can't escape the voice inside your head. It always speaks, always thinks, always evaluates, even when you're unaware of it. The mind doesn't rest just as the wind doesn't stop blowing. And without direction, it will swirl through painful memories, pessimistic scenarios, judgmental voices, and unresolved insecurity. Not because you're weak, but because that's how the mind naturally behaves when left without guidance. The mind cannot rest if left unattended. It needs a target to focus on, a principle to return to, a structure to keep from drifting. If you don't provide that, it will scavenge whatever it can from the environment, and often that means negativity, intensity, distraction, none of which nourish you. Like a house without a caretaker, it eventually turns into a ruin full of uninvited things. So does the mind. If you don't tend to it, it becomes a dumping ground for thoughts that don't belong to you. Seneca once said, "No man was ever wise by chance." No one stumbles into wisdom, just as no one accidentally attains inner peace. It is the result of a long journey, one in which you actively turn inward, observe every small thought, and choose which ones are worthy to walk beside you. Training the mind isn't a brutal battle, it's an art form where you learn to lead, not suppress, to witness, not judge, to shape, not destroy. And one day you realize, the mind, when properly trained, is no longer a saboteur. It's an ally. It reminds you of the values you chose to live by. It pulls you back from impulsive emotion. It helps you keep distance from fear so you can act with reason. It no longer whispers old failures, but reminds you of the resilience you've gained through them. It stops echoing negative statements and begins reinforcing the new beliefs you've been planting each day. As Epictetus emphasized, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. And your reaction is the direct result of how your mind has been trained. A guided mind pauses before reacting. It asks, "Does this truly matter?" before it grows angry. It reminds you, "I've overcome worse than this," when you feel overwhelmed. It gives you space to choose the best response instead of defaulting to the weakest one. One who masters the mind is not someone without emotion. They are someone who feels deeply but doesn't let emotion lead. They don't try to chase away negative thoughts, but let them pass, like clouds without clinging, without resisting, just watching as they go. And they choose to plant in their mind thoughts that lift, affirmations that ground, and images that reconnect them to their core values. This doesn't require you to retreat to a mountain or live like a reclusive philosopher. Just give yourself a quiet space each day to listen inward. Just write down 3 sentences each morning that you want your mind to remember. Just pause before each decision and ask, what is my mind saying? Is this truth or fear? Am I being led, or am I leading myself? These small actions done consistently are how you train the mind quietly, yet profoundly. Your mind is the one thing you carry with you everywhere, always. It can be a sanctuary or a prison. It can help you see clearly or keep you lost in illusion. But the beautiful truth is, you can train it. You don't need to be born with a steady mind, you only need to commit to walking alongside it daily, with awareness and discipline. Because in the end, the strong aren't those who never waver, but those who know how to return inward and find their axis. And when the mind is well trained, you don't just respond better, you live better. Not because life gets easier, but because you have a silent companion guiding you from within your directed mind. 9. Time is the only non-refundable asset. One of the most common lies we tell ourselves is, I don't have time. We say it every day as a way to delay what matters, reject change, and cover up the fact that we've let life drift by passively. But if you pause and look closely, you'll see the problem isn't that you don't have time, it's that you've never truly treated time as an asset. All of us, from the greatest figures in history to someone living quietly in the countryside, are given the same allotment of time each day, 24 hours. No more, no less. Time doesn't discriminate between rich or poor, favor the talented or the average, or reward the busy over the idle. It is ruthlessly fair. What makes life different is how each person decides to use that allotment. Some use time to build something lasting. They spend 5 minutes in stillness, an hour learning something new, a few hours caring for loved ones, and the rest fully present in their own lives. They don't live faster than you, they live more deliberately. Meanwhile, others let 5 minutes slip into video loops, an hour lost to social media, and an entire day vanish in urgent tasks that lead nowhere. Time isn't lost. It just changes form. It becomes what you're doing, what you're thinking, and what you're postponing. When you don't actively choose what deserves your time, someone else will choose for you. When you don't control your time, unconscious habits control you. And then you call it not enough time. We easily accept the idea that time is like money. But the truth is, money lost can be earned again, time cannot. You can reinvest money. You can be forgiven for poor financial choices. But you cannot retrieve an hour once it's passed, a chance once it's missed, or a moment you should have lived more fully. Every minute wasted is a piece of your life that never returns. And the real tragedy is, most people only realize this when they no longer have enough time left to start over. Seneca once said, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Life isn't short, we squander too much. We invest hours preparing for unnecessary social events, yet can't spare 10 minutes to reflect on ourselves. We spend months chasing goals that belong to others, while our personal values sit neglected. The problem isn't lack, it's misdirection. When you begin to treat time as an asset, not a default stream of days, but a finite resource, you'll transform how you live. You'll become serious about your choices. You'll learn to say no to things that don't serve your real growth. And you'll realize that the so-called lack of time is simply the result of an unfiltered life. Those who fail to see time's true value are easily swept up in the crowd's rhythm. They say yes to every invitation, accept every task out of fear of rejection, spend hours in meaningless conversations just to feel connected. But at night, in silence, unseen by anyone, they feel hollow. They can't point to a single moment in the day that made them feel deeper, clearer, or closer to themselves. Because they lived by someone else's tempo and lost their own inner beat. Time is not a resource, it is your life. And when you choose something to spend time on, you're choosing the life you will live. When you reject the trivial to focus on the meaningful, you're building discipline and priorities. When you cut off relationships that waste your time without adding value, you're asserting your dignity. And when you recognize that every morning is a fresh beginning, you are living as someone who truly holds freedom. Don't say, "I don't have time." Say more truthfully, "I haven't valued it enough." And once you begin treating time as the most precious thing you own, no one will need to teach you how to manage it. You'll filter, prioritize, and set boundaries not out of pressure, but from the understanding that time is not free, not expandable, not returnable. It moves only in one direction, and you decide where you're going with it. We often say, time is passing, as if it were a cold river flowing past us while we stand on the shore, watching it sweep life away. But that's not true. Time has no wheels, no feet, no will of its own. It doesn't pass. It doesn't abandon anyone. It simply exists steady, quiet, and without judgment. And you, with every choice, big or small, are either moving through it with direction, swimming against it, or drifting unconsciously. You haven't lost time. You've traded it. Every time you choose an extra hour of sleep, you trade it for an hour you could have used to learn something new. Every time you join a meaningless conversation, you trade away the silence needed to hear your own heart. Every time you delay action out of fear of failure, you postpone a future that could have started sooner. Time doesn't take from you, you give it away through your choices. And the scariest part isn't choosing poorly. It's not realizing you're choosing at all. Most people live unconsciously, passing through long days doing what they must, what they should, or what everyone else does, without pausing to ask, am I really living, or just existing inside a schedule I don't control? And when that ambiguity lasts long enough, it doesn't just kill time, it kills the deeper self within you. Seneca once wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We fear death as if it could come at any moment, but live as if we'll never die. We waste time daily, as though we'll always have enough to fix mistakes, to start over, to say what matters, to write that book, to become the person we were meant to be. But then, one day we look back and see, it wasn't time that left us. It was us who walked away from our truest life. You see this clearly when observing someone who has lost awareness. They wake each day without purpose, react to everything instead of choosing what matters. They let others define their value, let work consume their mind, let phones dictate their emotions, and let today become a copy of yesterday. And at night, they ask, why do I feel tired, lost, and unhappy? But the answer isn't in time, it's in how they're living each moment. Time doesn't need your admiration, it needs your awareness. Every choice you make, from whether you wake up early, read a book, or continue a toxic relationship, is your way of saying to time, "This is what I choose to stand for." And when those choices repeat daily, they don't just create results, they create the person you are becoming. Don't blame time for moving too fast. Look at how you're using it. Are you investing it in things that grow with age, skills, wisdom, character, meaningful relationships? Or are you spending it on fleeting pleasures, hollow comparisons, and promises you never fulfill? Try pausing one afternoon, shutting off all devices, doing nothing, and asking yourself, what did I use my time on today? Was it worth it? Did it serve something greater than this moment? If you feel unsettled, that's a good sign. Because from that moment on, you begin to awaken. When you realize that you are the one moving with each decision, habit, and reaction, you understand that true power doesn't lie in controlling time, but in mastering yourself. One person may live fewer years than another, but if they live with depth, awareness, and intentionality, then every moment in their life carries weight. That's not living long, it's living fully. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." The danger is not the end, but the endless delay of a life worth living. And if you keep blaming time, hiding behind busyness, and ignoring the voice inside you, are living someone else's life, not your own. So don't say time passed you by. Ask, where did I go with it? And if you don't like the answer, begin again. You don't need to wait until next week, next month, or next year. Time isn't moving, it's already here. So now, what will you choose for this moment? 10. Kill the old self and begin a new era. Some people go their whole lives changing hairstyles, jobs, or places to live, but never truly change themselves. Because real change doesn't come from anything external. It comes from whether you dare to face the most uncomfortable truth, letting go of the self you've grown familiar with. The past may not be beautiful, but it is familiar. It creates a comfort zone, even if it's a comfort zone built from pain. People often choose what they've learned to endure over what they've never dared to try. They stay in toxic relationships because they fear loneliness. They cling to meaningless jobs because they fear starting over. They hold on to outdated beliefs because they're afraid to be shattered by something they've never understood. And above all, they're afraid to leave behind the version of themselves they've spent a lifetime building, even when they know that version no longer fits. The painful truth is this: the version of you today cannot take you to the future you want. Old habits, old reactions, old limits. The very things that once helped you survive become a burden when you're ready to grow. And if you keep holding on to them, you'll remain in the same loop. Wake up, live the same way, and wonder why you're not moving forward. To evolve, you must be brave enough to shed your old skin, even if it's all you've ever known. You must be willing to face the vast unknown, where you're no longer who you were, and not yet who you'll become. It's a stage of chaos, doubt, and stumbling, but also the place where the seed of rebirth begins to take root. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not just an affirmation of self-mastery, but a call to stop seeking strength in old habits, past applause, or outdated definitions of success you once chased like gospel. You don't have to carry everything you've ever been. The mistakes you made, the people who hurt you, the times you failed, none of these are life sentences. They are lessons, they are fuel, but they are not your identity. Ironically, the more you've survived, the harder it becomes to let go of yourself. You see how much you've endured to become who you are, and walking away from that feels like abandoning all your effort. But no one says you must deny the past. You only need to face it, thank it, then gently set it down so you can move forward. You can't open a new door if you're still gripping the old handle. And the spiritual self, like the physical body, cannot grow if it keeps squeezing into clothes that no longer fit. Courage here isn't about breaking things. It's not rebellion. It's the quiet refusal to stay in a version of yourself that no longer serves your higher aim. The question you must ask is not, "Am I doing okay?" but, "Is this version of me worth living out for the rest of my life?" If the answer is not sure, then you already have a reason to begin changing. You can start by observing how you respond when hurt. Do you still go silent, endure, and sacrifice like an old reflex? Or are you now strong enough to set boundaries without guilt? You can start by noticing how you speak about yourself. Do you still use sarcasm, self-deprecation, and see yourself as never good enough? Or have you begun to speak the language of someone learning to lift themselves up? And you can start by examining your choices. Do you still prioritize ease, agreement, and immediate comfort? Or are you now choosing what's right even when it's harder, even when it forces you to grow? Change doesn't have to be a dramatic pivot. It can be a string of small, brave decisions made differently day by day, and one day you'll look back and no longer recognize the version of you who was once afraid, once hesitant, once clinging to things long expired. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Every beginning comes with an ending. But notice, it's not a loss, it's a transition. You're not truly losing anything, you're simply making room for something greater to arrive. You don't need anyone's approval for your transformation. You don't need to convince anyone to believe in the new you. The only agreement you need is with yourself, that you are worthy of a better, wiser, and stronger version. And to become that, you must be brave enough to say goodbye to the self you know it's time to outgrow. Evolution begins with that decision, not with proof, not with ceremony, not with applause. Just a silent commitment in your mind. I'm no longer who I was, and I will live like it every day. We often think that to begin a new life, we need something grand, a breakdown, a tragedy, a miracle, or a life-changing opportunity. But the truth is, no one is coming to pull you out of your old self. There is no magical milestone that grants you the right to be reborn. That right, from beginning to end, has always been yours, and it's given to you every day, the moment you open your eyes. When you wake up, something quiet happens, something few people notice. You are given a new chance not to live like yesterday. No one forces you to react the same way. No one makes you carry burdens that no longer serve you. No one ties you to your old mistakes except yourself. And no one can help you let go unless you choose to do it. We don't change our lives by declaring boldly, "Today, I'll be different." We change by doing small, intentional acts often enough that they become a new identity. That could be waking up 30 minutes earlier to journal and observe your mind. Saying no to an empty invitation because you're learning to respect your time. Choosing silence when provoked, not out of fear, but because you're prioritizing peace. Each of these tiny acts is a quiet cut from the old self and a new piece of the person you're becoming. You don't need to wait for the right conditions to begin again. You don't need to be richer. You don't need anyone to understand you. You don't need to go anywhere, achieve anything, or get someone's permission. Rebirth doesn't come after you've become perfect. It begins when you decide to stop waiting for perfection. There will be days you feel left behind, like all your previous efforts have been wasted. But do you know something? Those days are opportunities for rebirth too. Because rebirth isn't always bright or inspiring. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let a bad day become a bad week. Sometimes it's sitting down, breathing deeply, and forgiving yourself for surviving one more day. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He didn't say, "Wait until everything is stable to feel grateful." He said, "Be grateful the moment your eyes open, because that alone is your opportunity to start again." You're still alive, which means you still have the right to choose how you live. You can still adjust, retry, cleanse, redefine, right now, with no miracle required. You don't need a new year to have New Year goals. You don't need a new month to restart your habits. You don't need to wait until Monday to become disciplined. All you need is to choose again in this moment. Choose something small and let that action prove the new person you're becoming. Imagine this. What if every morning you asked, "What can I choose today to avoid living like yesterday?" Then gradually, you'd shift the entire trajectory of your life, not by rushing, but by repeating a conscious ritual of rebirth. No one is reborn with a bang. Rebirth happens quietly, in folding a page, not burning it, in standing up without fanfare, in fixing mistakes without self-condemnation, in starting over without waiting for permission, and in honoring yourself even in the smallest way more than you did yesterday. Rebirth isn't a one-time act, it's a lifestyle, a habit, a commitment constantly renewed. The more you practice it, the more agile you become with change. You stop needing life to soothe you. You stop blaming the past. You stop placing hope in some vague tomorrow. You live as if every opportunity you need already exists in today. And then, one day you'll realize, you don't need to escape your old life. You only need to stop reliving old days, because it's the unconscious repetition that truly traps you. When you live with intention, when you act with awareness, when you own every minute of your time, you free yourself from the loop. You gift yourself a new identity, not through ritual, not through declarations, but through consistent action in the direction of who you want to become. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." We're not short on opportunity, we just often let it pass by in unconsciousness. But if you wake up each morning and live as if it's your last chance to be reborn, then every day becomes an irreversible step forward. Even if it's slow, even if it's quiet, it always moves. So, if you've been waiting for the perfect moment to change, stop. There is no perfect moment. There is only the moment you decide not to live like before. And if you're still reading this, that moment is now. You don't need a miracle. You only need the courage to choose again and to hold that choice steady in every action, every word, every small decision you make today. That's how you kill the old self, and that's how you begin a new era of your life, not with noise, but with unwavering awareness. There were times in my life when I, too, waited for a miracle, a grand enough event to pull me out of the tired loop I was stuck in. But the longer I waited, the deeper I sank into a sense of helplessness, as if I were merely a passenger on a train with no power to change direction. Until one morning, entirely ordinary, I sat quietly in a small room and wrote a single sentence. I have the right to choose again. There was no applause, no milestone to mark it, but something inside me broke open, not loudly, but decisively. From that moment on, I stopped waiting for anything external. I began to live as if each day were a blank page, and every action I took was a deliberate stroke of the pen. And it was that quiet resolve that changed me the most. You don't need to feel inspired to begin again. You only need the courage to act as if you are worthy of a different life. And rebirth will happen from within. If you found value in this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. And remember, change is not a miracle. It is the inevitable result of someone who has truly chosen to live with awareness. See you in the next video.